Constitution, demanding the rights of we the people, broadcasting the truth the puppet media dare not report. Long live liberty and death to the New World Order. Prepare yourself. This is Real News Radio with your host, Farron.
We are back on The Real News, and again, our website's therealnewsradio.com, and you can email us on air at therealnewsradio.com. We've got several pieces of news we wanted to report. Then, as usual, we're going to go to the phones, let you call in. This is a forum for the listener. That was one of the reasons we wanted to start this broadcast, so people could call in, sound off, discuss these kind of issues like Bilderberg, the intentional collapse of our economy, the failure of our federal government, and give people a place where they can really voice their opinions and discuss openly these critical issues that are destroying our children's futures. So we're going to go ahead and turn it to Brian now to start us off in the second hour with our first news segment.
The quackery of chemotherapy, gunpoint medicine, and the disturbing fate of 13-year-old Daniel Hauser. Natural News, Mike Adams. You see it in newspapers and websites across the net, people insisting that 13-year-old Daniel Hauser must be injected with chemotherapy in order to save his life, and that anyone refusing to go along with that is criminal, deserving of arrest and imprisonment. What's most astonishing about the mainstream reaction to the forced chemotherapy of Daniel Hauser is not merely that they believe states now own the children, but that they believe in the entire world exists but one single treatment for cancer, and yet it happens to be the one that makes pharmaceutical companies the most money. The arrogance and ignorance of that position is mind-boggling. There was once a time when Western medical doctors believed that the heavy metal mercury was also a medicine. They methodically used mercury to treat hundreds of different diseases and conditions, oblivious to the fact they were actually poisoning people with this toxic heavy metal. And yet, imagine if authorities had arrested patients for not treating their children with mercury. Imagine if they threw parents in prison for refusing their mercury medicine. That would be equivalent to today's arrogant, misguided, and extremely dangerous campaign to outlaw saying no to chemotherapy. A brief history of medical quackery. It was mercury, in fact, that led to the term quack. Mercury is called quicksilver, and those doctors who prescribed it were eventually discovered to be pushing toxic chemicals rather than any real medicine. They were initially called quicks, then later quacks. The quackery of those doctors prescribing mercury wasn't hard to miss. People taking the mercury would get extremely ill. Their hair would fall out. They would lose their appetite and experience extreme loss of body weight. Many would simply die from the toxicity. Remarkably, these are the same side effects produced by chemotherapy. And today, chemotherapy doctors describe these side effects in precisely the same terms as the mercury quacks of a century ago, claiming the effects are part of the healing process and encouraging patients to find the courage to just go through with it. But let's pull our heads out of the muck here and acknowledge the obvious. Poisoning patients, whether with mercury or chemotherapy, will never actually produce any healing. And the prescribing such as toxic chemicals to patients with little more than sophisticated quackery backed by seemingly convinced data, which is actually based on scientific fraud, along with the urgings of cancer doctors who rely on a highly manipulative fear tactics to corral patients into treatments that will only harm them. Do parents have the right to protect their children from poison? Today, the mother of 13-year-old Daniel Hauser is on the run, having skipped out on the Minnesota court that ordered her to poison her own child. She is now considered criminally negligent by the state, a parent who belongs behind bars and will likely be imprisoned when she is arrested at gunpoint. And yet, I ask you this, what else could she have done? To appear in court and submit her child to chemical injections of a toxic substance would amount to child abuse. She is doing what any sensible parent would do. She's protecting her child from the poisons of the world and standing up against tyrants of modern medicine who so desperately seek to exploit her child for profit that they've actually turned to enforcing their business at gunpoint in order to do so. It's interesting that pharmaceutical medicine is the only industry in America that's forced to recruit its patients at gunpoint. I call it gunpoint medicine, and it's exactly as it sounds, enforcing of medical quackery at gunpoint.
That's an amazing story. It has gotten some press, and I mean, you're talking about using mercury. You remember they used to say cigarette smoking was good for you. They had commercials, doctors for saying cigarette smoking was good for you, wasn't harmful. Now we're talking, 40s, 50s when this was. But yeah, they're limiting a parent's right to choose, and it's exactly right. When they find this lady, they'll have her in jail, they'll take this kid, and they'll do whatever they want to. And then if the doctors are wrong and the chemotherapy backfires, there'll be no recourse.
None whatsoever.
And the story will drop out of the headlines if it goes that direction.
And of course, I mean, we've had this go on for centuries. They believed back when that in order to heal somebody, they had to bleed them. I believe that's what they did to Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, the use of leeches and all kinds of, the Roman Catholic Church used to put people to death for saying the world was round. Things change.
Drill a hole in somebody's head because they have a headache and they need to let the demon out.
Yeah, so that's an amazing story. And
but the precedence being set here is amazing that you're really not going to have any control over your medical decisions anymore, either as an individual or parent. It's just going to be imposed upon you. This is what you're going to get, fair, and if you don't like it, tough.
Well, I can tell you a situation, and Ty, you'll remember when Devin was a baby, he started out having some breathing problems and was sick. And before long, we had him on all kind of medication. We had him on an inhaler, was having to give him these treatments. He kept deteriorating. Well, finally, at Brenner's Children's Hospital, they said they were going to stick him with this 1,000 needles that would tell what he was allergic to. They were saying he was having an allergic reaction to something. I decided I was taking him off all the medicine, taking him home, forgetting the whole deal. The more we messed with the doctors, the worse he got. And took him home, took him off everything. They told me I was crazy. Got straightened right out. A couple of days, good as new, threw all that stuff away. And, they were doctoring him to death. I mean, he was getting in bad shape. And something had to be done. And going their direction wasn't working, so the only other alternative was just to forget everything they were saying. That's a tough decision when you've got a baby and you are trying to trust a doctor because you've got problems. And, whether they mean well or whatever, they were taking us down the wrong path.
Well, when a human being's poor health becomes a revenue source, to me, that's just wrong.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, you turn on a TV and it's pill after pill, all these problems you've never heard of before, and like we've discussed before, then they give the litany of side effects, which what happens is a person takes this pill because they've got the restless leg syndrome. Now, because they're on that pill, they've got 5 more problems to take pills for, and the next thing you know, they're so dumbed down and doped up until they can barely carry on a and the pharmaceutical companies are getting filthy rich off of it, and they control politicians, and corporations control so much of the government. This just an amazing time. This kind of follows up what we discussed last week with the Patriot Act and the Lundby story, and this was in the source is Kim Zettner with Wired reporting. Visa-Corp authorizations for national security and counterterrorism wiretaps dropped last year by almost 300. A new Justice Department report to Congress shows, but the FBI's use of national security letters to get information on Americans without court orders increased drastically from 16,804 in 2007 to 24,744 in 2008. The title of this is FBI Use of Patriot Act Authority Increases Dramatically. The 2008 request targeted 7,225 U.S. citizens. This is still much lower than the numbers of NSLs used in 2006, more than 49,000, but indicates that the FBI's reliance on the self-authorized subpoenas is rebounding after audits in 2006-2007 revealed the Bureau had been abusing the tool. The new 7-page report was submitted to Congress on Thursday. We will discuss this further after this break.